The Sahitya Akademi has recently announced its Yuva Puraskar Awards. To congratulate one of the winners, who is notorious for being historically inaccurate, I joined Jeysundhar to take apart the half-truths and the full lies in the print articles of Anirudh Kanisetti. Enjoy. It's interesting that the print has provided a pretty large platform, especially to a few authors that discuss the Chola kingdom. We will be discussing a few more of those articles. I think we'll be covering every print article that has mentioned the Cholas. Just let me share my screen. We'll go to the first one to be discussed, which is this one. So, Chola period wasn't the golden age of the Tamils, and the modern obsession with their glory is misplaced. This is an image of the Brihadishwara temple. So, yeah. So this again relates to the movie that was part of the discussion yesterday, which kind of brought the Chola kingdom again to limelight, made it a little mainstreamed among audiences, probably from the northern part of the country who were less aware of things. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I would say that the headline and the text of this article is misplaced. It's not that the glorification of the Cholas that is misplaced, because we have enough and more to say that the Chola period was actually the golden age for its subjects, not just because of the grand temples that we see today, but also, like I said, the way they systematically managed the land revenue system in order to ensure that nobody was fleeced. The land revenue was not just fixed based on the productivity of the land, it was also revised periodically. Okay. Now, further beyond this, yeah, it was also revised periodically based on the way the production worked and if rivers changed course, etc. Okay.
Okay,
Now,
that's bureaucracy actually working very well and very appropriately, right?
yeah. So if a river changed course and if people lost their land holding because the river has now changed course, all this was taken into account, and that is where the Cholas' local self-government comes into play. So each village has its Ur or Sabha assembly, which does this work on an annual basis. These are constituted based on a system of lots for choosing those that the local populace considered or deemed eligible for being elected to this place, to this assembly. And it is through this, in fact, the Chola emphasis on irrigation that I keep going back to this because it is an important aspect of how the Cholas went about their business. Okay, so the assembly actually has a separate cess. Okay, other than the taxes that are collected, it has a separate cess called the Ariayam or the lake cess. Okay, the lake cess is collected just for the maintenance, desilting, and expanding of the or digging deeper of the lake, just to ensure that if you were to collect taxes and if those taxes were to be used for other purposes, and then the assembly says no, I don't have any funds for desilting of the lake, to ensure that this does not happen, they collect a separate cess called the Ariayam to do this. Okay, now it is not just the Cholas do something very interesting. They realize that land revenue remains the mainstay of the empire, but in order to expand their finances, the Cholas look at what at this time is contemporary, because you see, trade continues to expand as the Cholas reach the peak of their empire in the 10th century and in the 11th century. Are sitting bang in the middle of two big trading hubs. Okay, you have the Arabs on the west, and you have the Chinese Empire on the east. Okay, so when the Chinese Empire, when it's the Song dynasty that begins to rule China, they send out emissaries to other contemporary kingdoms, encouraging them to come trade with China. Okay, and also the establishment of the Fatimid Caliphate leads to a boom in trade from the west. Now the Cholas realized that they are sitting in a very important hub, and they could capitalize on this. And who do they turn to? They turn to those that have been indulged, that have been indulging in this for a very long time. Okay, at this time you have a few very important trading guilds, in the southern part of India. Okay, one of the most important of these guilds is one that calls itself Disayayirath Nana Desat Ainutruvar. Okay, Disayayiram means from 1,000 dishas or 1,000 directions. Nana Desat is very understandable from various countries. Nana Desh. Okay, Nana Desat Ainutruvar means the group of 500. Okay, you also
Oh.
have other merchant guilds, one that is called Manigramam, there is another one that is called Anjuvannam. So, all these guilds, the Cholas capitalize on the presence of these guilds and they help expand the mercantilist activities. So, the Chola military expansion is not
Mm.
just, it's not just haphazard. I have an army, who do I attack? No, no, no. They actually have a strategy in place. There is a method to what they do. The Cholas realize that they have to have a preeminence, that they have to have a dominance on the ports on both sides of the coast, especially on the southern tip of India.
Mm.
Okay, so Rajaraja goes about one of his major campaign is on the western coast of India. Okay,
Okay.
so he defeats the I chieftains that are ruling in the west. Okay,
Mm.
and he captures those ports. And subsequently, he also realizes that there is a threat of piracy from the Lakshadweeps and what we have as today the Maldives, and from those islands, from pirates who are operating out of those islands. And he also has a military conquest of those islands.
Mm.
Okay, and then he's when he's succeeded by Rajendra also carries this on further. Okay, so there are those that have, those that like to criticize the Cholas, would like to say that they conducted raids for looting wealth, and that in that manner they were no different. For example, if you would scroll down, there is an argument being made here that Cholas were no less brutal than their contemporaries.
Mm.
But you see, the Chola raids, as much wealth as they bring in, they have a strategic motive in order to dominate the ports on both coasts of India.
Mm.
Okay. Now, if you were to specifically look at this article, if you could just scroll down a bit. Yeah. Now, in the previous paragraph, the article makes the argument that the Cholas were seen by their population as very brutal. So if we were to ask the question that was the Chola polity brutal? Like I said, the agricultural expansion, the investment of state funds. Okay, so as opposed to a lot of states that we see in medieval age, especially in the north, where the tax collection and the surplus from the tax collection is used for building grand mausoleums to living kings for their dead bodies to occupy after the death, or
Mm.
for grandiose projects of acquiring diamonds or gems to decorate the royal court, the
Mm.
Cholas make significant investments into irrigation. And their military campaigns are focused on mercantilist expansion to ensure that the merchant guilds of the Chola country have
Mm.
greater access to the ports, and they through them the Chola state earns revenue. So there is a well established symbiotic relationship between the state and the merchant guilds.
Mhm.
With the state backing is how the guilds operate. Okay.
No, but let's just go with what this headline says, right? Jay, this is a very clear thing. It says, and I kind of feel like the author of this article has a very obvious bias against them, and I'd like to see if it's,
Uh, Instead
correctly
of
placed.
bias, I would rather use the word agenda.
I mean, I'm just going from
I'll,
a
I'll
layperson
explain. I'll explain
perspective.
why I go in favor of agenda instead of
So
bias
one of the things I would
later.
like these to be discussed, because one thing that is clearly mentioned is the media's yearning for Chola glory. It's not recent. As we see, it's been written about. It's one of the major dynasties, and this can be said about pretty much any dynasty that's discussed. Right?
Yeah.
Is it obsession or yearning for Maratha glory? Is it obsession or yearning for at least a century and a half, or Mughal glory, even making things up to the benefit of the Mughals, changing stories in order to benefit Akbar, etc. That's not a yearning. There is a discussion about an Indian dynasty. I don't see how this fits, but he's also written that unceasing appetite for expansion and frequent violence against women were written about. Again, something very
This
deeply disturbing, considering that we've had the invasions, the Arab invasions, the Turkic invasions, but and also the missionary, the sex work that was instituted during the British colonization, even using minor Hindu girls. But my thing is that is there a lot of frequent violence against women that is glorified during the Cholas time? I just want to address this.
we do not have enough sources to make that claim. To simply put it,
So that is a source here. Let's check if that works.
I suspect that's another article.
That just is another article by somebody else in. Yeah, that's not a source.
And
Let
as
me
far
just
as
share the source.
unceasing appetite for expansion is concerned, it's you cannot really single out the Cholas when everybody else was doing the same thing.
No, I mean, I'd be okay with that. I just want to make sure, that's an unfair claim to make, considering that other dynasties have actually had very well recorded histories of violence against women, which does not seem to be the case when it comes to the Cholas. Not that we've heard, but let's look at the claim made here. So
Yeah, if you were to look at it, this is an article that uses a text called Veerapandiyan Manaivi as its source.
yeah,
Okay, if you were to scroll up, you would see that Veerapandiyan Manaivi is a later day novel. Okay. Yeah, if you were to scroll down, you see this is a historical novel, Veerapandiyan Manaivi, which was written very recently, not even in the 20th century. It's written in 2012. Okay.
oh,
So using Veerapandiyan Manaivi to show what happened during Chola time is like using Bahubali to explain what happened in Mahishmati Mahajanapada.
okay, this is just deeply inauthentic. This is very wrong. I cannot believe that the print would actually platform an author
You
using.
see, he's actually using a novel from 2012 to make a point about 11th century.
This is wrong. Okay, I don't know. I think this
Okay,
needs to
so
be
on
counted in
that
terms of
on that
scholarship.
vein, while continuing on that vein, yeah, just if you were to look at this, okay, he is speaking about in this when he says peasant lord equation. Okay, when he comes to the second paragraph, he's talking about something called the Annan Markadai. Second paragraph, second line, he's
Yeah,
talking about
yeah,
the Annan Markadai. He
right.
is using a timeline of 1000 to 1500 CE. Okay,
Mm.
this is a very broad timeline that is being given 1000 to
500. Yeah.
1500 CE. And this timeline is being given with good reason because he wants plausible deniability. Why does he want
Right.
plausible deniability? Because Annanmar Kadai is mostly from the 14th and the 15th century.
Okay.
He is dragging it back to 1000 CE just to make it appear as a contemporary source of the Cholas.
This is wrong, Jay. This is scholarship
Okay.
being sent out to people that are not aware of any of the facts, and they will not know that this is true.
I mean, the Annanmar Kadai would still be relevant in the 15th century if the Chola Empire was around at that time. But it is not. It wasn't around by this time. The Chola Empire has shrunk and
Yeah.
is a non-entity. To be honest, okay. Now let's go into this Anand Markadai. What it says. It's talking about a family of so-called upper caste landlords who are
Mm.
sent by an unnamed Chola king. You see why he's unnamed?
Yeah.
How do you name somebody that does not exist except in
Right.
your imagination? Okay.
Right.
Now, they are sent to claim a nearby territory, even though it is already inhabited by artisans and Adivasis. Just give it a thought. Just give it a preliminary thought. If any large piece of territory can be inhabited only by artisans and Adivasis,
Mm. Mm.
okay, doesn't hold water. Now,
I'm going to just break it down for the audience. The reason it cannot exist is because artisans, Adivasis, and anybody who lives there will still need a lot of trade. They will need
non-artisanal goods.
agriculture. They will, yeah, they just will not exist as
Yeah.
a single group.
And now we come to this word Adivasi. This is a very interesting use of this word
Yeah.
called
Yes,
Adivasis. Okay.
I wondered why this was being
Yeah.
used.
Now, the word Adivasi is not a historic word. It was a word that was coined in the 20th century. Okay. Now, it is a neologism or a new word that was coined in the 20th century. We have nothing to show that one group of people saw themselves as original inhabitants of the land and the others saw themselves as foreign aliens encroaching upon that land. Okay. So this concept of Adivasi is itself a modern construct, and therefore this is a modern word. And to use a 20th century word to describe a social reality of the 10th century is dishonest and deeply flawed.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Now, coming to the next part. Okay. Now, he is talking about that these landlords, he's saying that the landlords command that the artisans now begin to work, okay, for them, right? If you were to scroll down a little bit, the author claims that according to the Annanmar Kadai, the landlords command that the artisans will henceforth be paid in grain and not gold.
Okay.
Okay. Just go up a bit.
Well,
Just go up a bit to the previous paragraph. Go up. Yeah. Okay. So as soon as a little bit above the previous paragraph, actually, yeah. No. Sorry. You'll have to scroll down. Yeah, this one. A little bit up. He then commands that they will henceforth be paid in not in gold but in grain, as decided by their landlords. Okay. Now let's go with the author's timing of the Annanmar Kadai, where he says this is between 1000 and 1500 CE. Okay. If we were to go with this, so up until 1000 CE, when these landlords appear, the artisans are being paid in gold. It's these landlords who are saying, okay, from today you will not be paid in gold, but you will be paid in grain. Right? This is what the author himself claims. This is not my claim. He says that the landlord commands that artisans will henceforth be paid in grain and not in gold. Right? Now, if you scroll down two paragraphs, he is quoting another author, Brenda E.F. Beck, okay, where Brenda says that artisans were paid in gold in the early centuries of the Common Era.
Okay, that's 1500 years ago.
Yeah, so you cannot make both claims. You cannot say that they were paid in gold in the early centuries of the Common Era and then say that this changed in 1000 CE when these landlords appeared. Okay? And while we are in this
entire article is just I'm sorry, but any reading of history, even of purely Mughal history, will kind of just show how many rebellions occurred at the time, during the time of the British, and these sort of motivations were not ascribed to them, especially based on the local literature composed during that time or in 2012. So
now Brenda E.F. Beck makes the claim that artisans were paid in gold in the early centuries of the Common Era before agrarian states were the norm. But as Sangam literature tells us, and as the Chola country was considered to be rich in agriculture, we already know that agrarian states were the norm in early century CE. It was not before. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you were to scroll up a bit, he is using it's right there. Now, in the annual reports of South Indian Epigraphy 1926.
Right.
Okay, he is talking about the brutality of medieval landlords upon tenants, serfs, and slaves. Okay. So he is citing two inscriptions, 94 and 95, from the annual reports of South Indian Epigraphy 1926. We see a mention of runaway slaves branded with the trident of Shiva. Okay. Now, to give more detail and context instead of just the number of the inscription, right? The inscription 94 is from the Vatharanyeswara temple of Tiruvalangadu. Okay. Now it talks about punishing and bringing back people who had been presented for the service of the temple. Okay. Now, you are free to assume that because they were presented for the service of the temple, they were slaves. Okay. But this is what you get from inscription 94. And you are free to make that assumption. But if you just go to inscription 95, the very next inscription from the very same temple, referring to the very same set of people. Okay. What does inscription 95 say? It talks about the gift of lands that are made to the people who were presented for the service of the temple. Do you have any recorded history of slaves being gifted land? So that is another incongruence that we have in this particular, in the sources that the author himself has cited. Going beyond that, the author has then quoted, if you can see, the next quote that he has made is of the Lekha Paddhati from Gujarat. How is a text from Gujarat used as a source to substantiate a claim about the Cholas? That is the next problem. Okay, this is a completely irrelevant source that is being cited to make a case about the Cholas. Now, if you were to scroll down a little bit more, he is talking about the Chola polity being a group of elites. He says the Chola polity at its heart was a group of elites. Now, you'll have to say, you'll have to ask yourself, which polity was not a group of elites?
Yeah, it's just this. I don't know. It can be taken apart.
I mean, this accusation of things being a group, of polity being a group of elites is made not just against ancient and medieval kingdoms, but contemporary kingdoms, even kingdoms that we have today are criticized. Sorry, even not kingdoms, even states, nation states that we have today are criticized as being nothing more than a group of elites. Right? Forget the past. We see the accusation of the same nature from all over the world that today's polity is that of a group of elites. So should we be singling out the Cholas for this criticism here? That's unfair. Okay. Now, then the author says that these elites collaborated to generate revenue from land, which is true, as we've already seen. But then he says that they kept as much wealth for themselves as possible, which is patently untrue. Like I said, the state invested heavily in irrigation. Okay, what is the basis for this claim that the elites kept as much of the wealth for themselves as possible? Did the rulers inordinately tax the people? Did they have religion-specific taxes for some people? Or more importantly, did the rulers build magnificent mausoleums when there was a famine in the kingdom, as we see in the case of popular buildings in the north? We don't see any of these with the Cholas. Right? What we keep seeing the Cholas through the lens that we have for other kingdoms in order to say that the mausoleums, simply because the mausoleums were private projects, tomb of this king, tomb of that sultan was the private project that he had. And, based on that, the temples were also private projects of prestige for the rulers. No. The temples, as we've already discussed, were for public good, right? With the Cholas invested resource from the state coffers towards improving the agrarian economy, they also actively pushed to develop alternate sources of revenue. Okay. Now it is very difficult to believe that the Cholas, who push more and more for both domestic and foreign trade, would work towards taking away land from the artisans, as the case that the Annanmar Kadai accuses them of. Right? So the grand projects that we see of the Cholas today, what are these projects that we see of the Cholas? Every single thing that we attribute to the Cholas in terms of their construction works is either public works, such as lakes like the Veeranam Lake, which contributes to the Veeranam project to this day,
right,
or temples that continue to be used by devotees to this day. Right? There's no private project of a Chola king that we have in existence today, simply because they did not invest as much in it. It is that clear, right? So, these temples, this is why these temples receive, for example, a mausoleum of a sultan receives contribution from the sultan. That's it. But the Brihadishwara temple of Rajaraja records it by himself. He says that this temple, the contributions made by him, by his sister, by the women of his house, and by everybody in the kingdom. He automatically makes the mention that everybody in the kingdom has contributed to the construction of this temple. and willfully so. The temples receive contribution not just from a group of elites, but also the general public, right? So going on, the next paragraph begins by saying the conquests of the Cholas are perhaps what they are best known for today.
Essentially, it's the same violence against women
Yeah,
and citation of something by Rajendra Chola himself.
I mean, I can bet my July salary that I'm yet to get my hands on, but I can bet my July salary that a much higher percentage of people know about the great living Chola temples than they know about Rajendra Chola's Kadaram campaign. Right? More people are aware of the Brihadishwara and the Gangakonda Choleswara temple than they know about the Bengal campaign of Rajendra Chola.
Right.
It's that simple. So it is not the conquest that the Cholas are best known for. It is their public works that they are best known for, right?
Yep.
And then, the author goes on to say that some have even made absurd claims of Cholas defeating Mahmud of Ghazni. For the first, I mean, this is the first time I see somebody making this claim absurd.
Honestly, even I haven't seen something like that.
There are people who, there are people that have the idle curiosity of what ifs. We have these what ifs of history. So people idly wonder what if Rajendra's forces had met Mahmud of Ghazni's forces. But that does not mean they claim that the Cholas defeated Ghazni. Right? So this is something that the author says that there is an absurd claim, and he himself refutes a claim that nobody has made except for himself.
Right.
Right. And then there's this other piece by the same author where he, based on all this, you see the author's conclusion, where he says that if this can be called a golden age, it was only a golden age for kings, which it was not. It was a golden age for the peasant on the field because he had better irrigation facilities for him to carry out agriculture. It was a golden age for the merchant who could trade not just within India, but also carry out his trade all across Southeast Asia, all the way up to China. Okay, because you see, more than a century after Rajendra Chola's Southeast Asia campaign, we have inscriptions of contributions made by Chola merchant guilds from Indonesia, operating in Indonesia. Right? So that is how much trade expands. So it's not a golden age just for its kings. It's a golden age for the peasant. It's a golden age for the merchant. And of course, it is a golden age for the soldier as well as the king.
I would like to understand how golden age of any people is decided. Sure, we have the Renaissance, and you have the European golden age, and then it was actually the Dark Ages was the Dark Ages only for Europe, while the rest of the world flourished at the time. So it is an extremely elite concept anyway. It's not like the common person was participating in the Renaissance and making paintings.
And that is exactly where the Cholas stand out, because the common people stood to benefit from the standardization and integration that the Cholas brought about.
Literature, that is archaeology. Okay, I started with bias, but I shall go with your term of agenda. Unfortunately, we have discussed only one article, and there are 3 more pending, and I think we'll have to move that to another episode, and I am going to take up more of your time.
Or we could quickly do the rest in 5 minutes. I mean, we don't have to delve this deep into the others.
I think that would be interesting. It's making me angry enough to want to, have good counters available to them, because each of these points is falsifiable, right? It's not a belief system. It's falsifiable through evidence and logic. So, okay, let's try this. I'm going to share the second article. So, why is there hype about the Chola
Let's
dynasty?
do the one about medieval king beat Cholas at their own game.
All right. Yeah, the Malayan king.
Yeah. So, if you were to make the claim that A beat B at B's own game, you will have to say that A actually beat B, right?
Yeah.
Now, the problem is this Malayan king, Chandrabanu of Tamralinga, okay? Now, by the time Chandrabanu is actually coming around, the Cholas, there is no more Chola empire at all. Okay, so how do you beat Cholas at their own game when there is no Chola empire?
By existing.
right?
For the viewers, I would request you to ask the print why they only tend to publish, why they even not only tend to publish. I just want to understand how this sort of terrible scholarship is platformed. And this is nothing against the rhetoric, against the language, which is great. It's just the conclusions are all wrong. It's not
You
that
see,
the author has done a lot of
if you were to
bad.
scroll down, if you were to scroll down, he talks about Chandrabanu of Tamralinga coming in, coming over here. So the use of language is very clever. Okay, in the last part of this paragraph, one Malayan king Chandrabanu actually conquered a part of Sri Lanka and battled with the armies of the Pandya kings of Tamil Nadu. Right?
Mm,
Why does he use these two verbs, conquered and battled with?
mm.
Because we know from history that Chandrabanu did not beat the Pandyas. He was
Okay.
defeated by the
He just
Pandyas.
battles with them, yes.
Okay, he just battles with them and he's grossly defeated by them. So Chandrabanu does not get to beat Cholas at their own game. He does not, because the Chola Empire is no more. He does not get to beat the succession, the succeeding empire of the Pandyas either, because he's grossly defeated by the Pandyas. Not only is he defeated, he's defeated by Jatavarma Sundara Pandyan. Okay, and Sundara Pandyan's brother Jatavarma Veera Pandyan kills Chandrabanu. Okay, Chandrabanu's son rules as a feudatory of the Pandyas at that point of time. So he just does not get to beat the Cholas at the game. I mean, does that even remotely sound like beating someone at their game?
To the author.
So this is another headline that's clickbait and is not substantiated, right?
All right.
Now, if you were to go to the Sengol piece that the
Right.
author has written, yeah, in
So we
that.
have the typical New York Times, Washington Post terminologies. Hindu nationalist heroes. Like these guys existed 1500 years, 2000 years. No, 2005, 2000 years ago. And they are apparently Hindu nationalist heroes. All right.
There are those,
Um,
there are those that parallelly claim that Cholas are not Hindus and
Not
also
Hindu,
claim
and
that they
then
are
they
Hindu
are Hindu
nationalist
nationalists.
heroes.
Yes.
I mean,
So
maybe
this
maybe the
source.
sign of an intelligent mind is to hold two contrasting ideas in it at the same time, but that is also the trait of an insane mind. So let's leave it at that. If you were to go down this article, the author makes a point that there is little to no evidence of lasting Chola control in Southeast Asia, aside from a few lines in one inscription. He emphasizes on this quite a bit. You need to scroll down quite a bit. This comes towards the end.
Okay.
Yeah, this part. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, on this, while we are on this, before we get to that, if you see the first line of this paragraph, he says,
Mm,
on the question of good governance,
mm.
on the question of good governance, decades of historical research has shown that the Chola state was in no way comparable to a modern one. Is that
It
even
was a
fair?
monarchy. It was a monarchy and should be compared to states at the time. A lens
Yeah.
of presentism cannot be used on a
I mean,
dynasty that existed.
is it even fair to do this comparison? Do you even have any
This
semblance
is
of
not history.
sense to do this? How
Yeah,
can you
no.
compare something that's from the 21st century to something from the 11th century?
Right. Yeah, I'll just get
Yeah,
angry.
if you were to scroll down. Yeah, so yeah, this paragraph, a little up. Yeah, next, the historical evidence for Bhagavat's Southeast Asia claim is just one inscription left by Rajendra I.
Mm,
Okay, so there is little to no evidence of lasting Chola control in Southeast Asia, aside from a few lines in one inscription. Okay,
mm.
so based on this, we come to the conclusion that let me ask you if this is right, if my understanding is right based on what I've just read. Okay, Chola Southeast Asia relations. All we know is from one inscription. Yeah, that is the idea that he's giving you in 2023. I think this one is from June or May, maybe. So, this is the idea he's giving you in 2023. The
Mhm.
same author on the same platform has written another article. The other one that we have here, if you were to open that one,
Yeah. I'm sharing that
This,
now.
yeah, how Cholas and Mings dominated. Yeah, this
Yeah.
one. If you were to scroll down this one, the part where he's talking about Rajendra Chola or Cholas in general, this piece is from September 2022,
Mm,
right? Scroll down a bit.
right. He does mention this here.
Yeah,
So,
where he's no, no, come down a bit. The next paragraph, actually, the part where it begins with finally after the yeah. Now you see after the 1000 1025 raids, it happened in 1025 CE. It appears that there was a change in the structure of the Sri Vijaya Confederacy, right?
mm,
Now, though later Chola emperors found themselves unable to undertake similarly impressive expeditions, it seems that the court still tried to maintain influence in Kedah.
mm, mm,
The future Chola emperor Kulothunga I was dispatched there in the late 1060s, a good 40 years after, almost half a century after a
mm,
request for mediation. Essentially, different aspect, different sub rulers of the Sri Vijaya Empire are not able to agree upon an
mm.
issue of succession, and who do they call? They call the big boss Kulothunga I.
Sure.
Okay, so on the one hand, the author claims that Kulothunga was dispatched 4 decades after Rajendra Chola's invasion to
Mhm.
mediate in the Sri Vijaya, while in another piece, he says that there is little to no evidence of lasting Chola control in Southeast Asia. So, which of
Yeah.
these are we talking about? It's either this or it's that, right? You can't say both at the same time.
Right. Well, apparently you can because I don't know. I think we mentioned this on our previous discussion. Viewers, if you're reading articles, please
See,
use your critical thinking because it's very easy. I will say it's very easy because we are then when we go to a classroom, perhaps that's the mentality. We go in with a blank slate. We do not study a subject beforehand unless we're particularly interested, and this is the result because we wait to be indoctrinated. If somebody with particular apparent credentials or studied something writes, then we tend to take them completely seriously. Look, I'm a columnist, Jay is a columnist as well. And if we were not backing our columns with research, I'm sure we would love to be called out as well. However,
yeah,
in this case, it's not the research only, the conclusions, and it's quite obvious at some point, right? As an archaeologist told me rather dryly at a conference in February, this cannot be disproven. This is not something that can be argued against. If somebody says
hearsay.
that a lot of this is rhetoric, so just be careful about what you're reading. And I
See,
think Jay,
the thing is, just to conclude, the author is fully aware that a reader with a basic level of knowledge will dismantle this piece very easily. Okay, he's fully aware of this. It's not that he floats in a cloud that he's not aware of. He's fully aware of this, but he also knows that a majority of his target audience will lap this up without a question. More
absolutely.
importantly, he knows that this will join the elaborate corpus of unsubstantiated secondary sources. Now that he
Like
has
the Times
written
of
this,
India article that we went, that was written
exactly,
in, that
which was
cited
based on a
written
2012
in
novel.
2012. Yes.
So this will join a corpus of secondary sources. Now that he has written this will be cited as the source for somebody else to write something else that is even more atrocious, right? Now this will be used with a high degree of success to build an effective narrative to bring about civilizational guilt, institutionalized gaslighting, and this will lead us into denial, disconnect, and deracination. Okay, which is why, despite the author not deserving this kind of mind space in your mind or mine or of that of the listeners, it is essential and it is very important to counter this kind of fabricated atrocity literature every time it is spoken, every time it is written, at every iteration. Do it emphatically, do it with primary sources, puncture the claims that are made just to ensure that this also goes on record as much as these
Right.
claims that have been made.
For the most part, I will also request you, if you're watching this, that Jay essentially dismantled these articles through logic. He didn't actually go and research so much. He just saw that, okay, here's a discrepancy, here's an article by the same author making a counterclaim to his own previous claim. Neither of these is authentic. Here's something that is claimed that does not logically lead to this conclusion, yet a certain conclusion is being drawn. So these are things that, I think there needs to be an awareness of critical analytical capabilities, which hopefully this video helps with. Thank you so much, Jeff, for joining. I really look forward to our next chat as well. It's very stimulating to have somebody so well versed with history discuss these things online. Viewers, I hope you've liked this. Thank you again. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sagarika.